Good morning, Year 12s. So today we are looking at different tissues. What that means are the little collectives of cells. When they form together, they create tissues. So by the end of this lesson, I want you to know what some different types of tissues are and how they are present in the body. I want you to identify the role of each bodily tissue, and I then want you to be able to explain the importance of bodily tissues. You've got your memory platform here. Give yourself about 6-7 minutes because there are 6 questions on this. So time yourself and go through the memory platform for me. We have already gone over the learning outcomes of today's lesson, but I just want to reiterate. So the first thing that we are going to do is to know the different types of tissues present in the body. We won't go through all of them today, but I want you to at least know the 4 different types of tissues. I want you to identify the role of bodily tissues. Specifically, we are looking at epithelial tissues today, and we are also going to be able to explain the importance of bodily tissue. To start the lesson off, I want you to watch this clip on YouTube. As you are watching it, only watch up to 3 minutes and 40 seconds and then turn it off, because that little end bit we don't need to know about. I thought it's quite a nice way to introduce a new topic to you without having to hear it from me first. The 4 different types of tissues are epithelial tissue, which you guys should have just watched about. The next type is muscle, connective tissues, and nervous tissues. Each type of tissue has a separate role and a different responsibility within the body. As you guys have probably already guessed, we are going to look more closely at what epithelial tissues do. The main role of epithelial tissues is to form the coverings or the linings on the body and form the majority of glands. So if we take something like a blood vessel or our skin, the epithelial tissues form the lining of that. The bottom layer, which is called your basement membrane, is there for support, and it connects the epithelial tissue. So all of the bottom layer of the cells will be attached to that basement membrane. The nerves in the epithelial cell receive oxygen through diffusion. That was mentioned on the video, and I think they explained that slightly better than me, which is why I use the video. And then lastly, there is a real great capacity for growth and repair within these cells, which is why they form lots of protective layers. If you think about dermatologists, and I'm sure you guys are quite into your skincare, dermatologists will always recommend that sleep will help to repair skin. The reason for that is because your epithelial tissues, your tissues will repair better whilst you are sleeping. We can break our epithelial tissues into 2 sections. The first one is simple and the second one is compound. So a simple epithelial tissue is 1 cell thick, and our compound is several different layers thick. There are 4 types of simple epithelial tissue, or epithelia tissue. The first one that we're going to look at is your squamous epithelial. The second one that we'll look at will be our ciliated epithelial. Our third, our cuboid epithelial, and then finally we've got our columnar epithelial tissue. I'm going to go through these each individually, but just want you to know the 4 types of simple epithelial tissue. The first type of simple epithelial tissue that we're going to look at is a squamous cell. So our squamous cells are very, very flat, and they are constantly forming new cells. So if we think of something like dandruff, that will be our squamous cells that are shedding effectively. This whole process of the flat cell allows for osmosis to take place, which is why you will often find that your squamous cells line things like blood vessels and alveoli. The next type of cell that we're going to look at is the ciliated cell. So this has almost like little hairs attached to it, and again this will allow for osmosis. The hair-like structures that you can see at the top of the cell here, I've just marked those in purple for you, they allow for the absorption and the secretion of mucus. And so that's why you'll find these in your respiratory tract, you'll find these in your fallopian tubes, because they secrete mucus. Next, we're going to look at our cuboidal epithelial tissues. So our simple cuboidal are obviously cube-shaped, and they've got a really large nucleus. So if we look here, we can see it's a large spherical shape in comparison to the size of the actual cell. And the reason that the nucleus is so large and the shape of the cell is because it allows water to pass through it. So you will find your cuboidal cells or tissues within things like the kidneys, the liver and the glands, because they allow for that water to pass through them. We've then got our columnar epithelial tissues, and these line digestive organs. They also make up part of the central nervous system tissues, and the reason for this is because they are quite long, I guess tall in structure. So because of that size, they allow for lots of absorption to take place in terms of absorbing nutrients, which is why they make up the digestive system. As mentioned already, our compound epithelia are several different layers of cells that are together. If you research this outside of this lesson, which hopefully you guys do just to consolidate your understanding, you will find that lots and lots of websites, lots and lots of research or places where you find your research will refer to your compound epithelia as your stratified epithelia. So if you see that, please know that they are referring to the same thing. So the main purpose or the main characteristics is that there are multiple layers of cells. We know this already. The purpose of this is for protection, which is why we will commonly find it or talk about it in terms of your epidermis, which is your outer layer of your skin. That layer is there for protection. You can find your compound epithelia in your vagina, in the mouth, the esophagus, and it's because there are lots and lots of layers. The layers of the tissue are created through squamous cells, cuboidal, columnar and ciliated epithelial cells. I've got this image here of a skin cell. I think this will be the easiest thing for us to relate to, knowing that I'm sure all of us have some sort of skincare regime. When you wake up in the morning, you must apply like a moisturiser, or you may have heard about the layers of the skin and some of the terms that I'm going to use. So I think it will be best for me to describe what a compound epithelial cell or epithelial tissue will look like using the skin. This is an example of the skin and the tissues that make up what we know as the skin. So this is an example of compound epithelia. So the first thing that I want to point out is your base membrane. We can see that here. So the connective part of the tissue where the cells connect to is our base membrane. The second area that I want us to look at is our our columnar cells. So they are here. We can see that they are nice and tall in structure, and that they are thinly packed together. The next type of cell that we're going to look at is our cuboidal cells. So we can see they are the same in width as what they are length, and they've got the big nucleus. And then lastly, we can see our squamous cells. So here they're very flat and they're very tightly packed together. So just by looking at this diagram, as to say, we can, now that we know the characteristics of the different cells, we can highlight where they sit within the tissue. The next part that I want to point out is your epidermis. Now this here is the top layer of the skin. When we look at all of these things and all of these components together, we know that together this creates the compound epithelial tissue, which is the tissue with all of the different cell structures piled on top of each other to create that those compound epithelia. Okay. So I want to go into a little bit more detail here and explain how the cells move and how they create that skin pattern together. So the outer layer of the skin, our epidermis, which we've already said, is flattened from the pressure on the outside. As the cells, we'll start from here, as the cells advance from our base membrane, they push their way up. So the cells that we've got on the top in our epidermis, these are all dead skin cells. As the cells are pushing up from the top, there is a protein called keratin. I know keratin is massive at the moment in the hair industry, and that you want your hair to have lots of keratin in it because it's that protein and it promotes growth. So as we've got the keratin that's present, as the cells push their way up, they become keratinized, and that simply means that the cells are being filled with keratin. The process of keratinization, as to call it, is essential because it stops, it pushes all of the skin cells up to the surface, and as that happens, it stops the microorganisms invading deeper structures. So that means that it protects our deeper structures, and it also creates a waterproofing for the skin. So when we look at this whole structure, the things that I want us to really notice, really understand, is that you've got your base membrane. That is where, I'll highlight it for you as I speak. We've got our base membrane. Our base membrane is where the cell structures attach themselves to. We've then got a variety of different cell structures that create the compound epithelia, which is lots of the structures or lots of different cell structures coming together to create that compound. When we look at the layers of the skin, we can see that we have our compound epithelia, which then create the epidermis, and that process of the epidermis being created is because our skin cells are shedding. We're now going to move on to looking at a couple of hinge questions. Then I want you to answer some questions on your Microsoft forms. Looking at this hinge question, there are 4 types of simple epithelial tissues, and they are either 1, simple tissues, squamous, cuboidal and ciliated; 2, ciliated, squamous, cuboidal or columnar; or 3, simple stratified epithelial or compound. Please pick your answer 1, 2 or 3 now. We will go through the correct answers in 5 seconds. So the correct answer is cilial, squamous, cuboidal and columnar. The reason for that is because when we are thinking about the 4 different types of epithelial tissue, we know that that question is asking you what cells are the tissues made up of. If we look at the first answer, we know that simple on its own is not a type of, it's not one of the types of cells that make up epithelial tissues. And again, if we look at these, we know that compound is not a simple epithelial tissue. Moving on, the next question. The main functions of epithelial tissues are 1, for protection of mucus secretion; 2, mucus secretion, osmosis and protection; or 3, osmosis, mucus absorption and secretion. I'll give you 5 seconds to pick your answer. And the correct answer for this is osmosis, mucus absorption and secretion. We know that simply because protection is the function or the main functions of compound epithelial cells and not of simple epithelial cells. So now I want you to go onto your Microsoft forms and complete the questions that are relevant for this lesson. If any of you have any questions or you need any support, as always, please email me. This time I promise I will try to get the link right, and there will be no second email from me. So good luck, and if you need anything, just give me a shout. Thanks guys, and have a good day.